My English name is Willie and my Chinese name is Liu Shao-wei, and my student number is S07410007, and my level is freshman. I have a dream from Martin Luther King Jr. I'm happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstrations for the freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American, in whose symbolic shadow we stand today, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flame of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of the vast oceans of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American societies and found himself an exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of the Republic wrote the magnificent word to the Constitutions and the Declarations of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on the promissory note, insofar as their citizens of colors are concerned. Instead of honoring the sacred obligations, America has given the Negro people a black check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunities of this nation. And so we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us up upon demand the riches of freedoms and the security of justice. We have also come to this hollow spot to remind Americans of the furious urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take a tranquilizing drug as gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to raise from the dark and desolate valleys of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nations from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It will be fatal for the nations to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedoms and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. And those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steams and will not be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. And there will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nations until the bright days of justice emerge. But there's something that I must say to my people, who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high planes of dignities and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate in physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force.